For those of you guys I've not yet met, my name is Dr. Sweeney, so welcome to our office. This is our Holy Hormones workshop. But this is a topic, I've had so many questions about this particular topic because everybody's wondering what's the deal with the hot flashes and night sweats and this low energy issue. Men have questions about low T and erectile dysfunction and all these other things that they don't want to really admit but are present. They're very real problems, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So we're gonna tackle a lot of those right now. So holy hormones, right? So that's when I was doing the research for this workshop, I started to realize that your hormones really control everything about how you feel. So if you feel good, if you've ever felt good at any point in your life, it's because of hormones. If you've ever had a sense of pleasure or energy or any vitality, that's all because of your hormones. If you've ever felt bad on the other end of that equation, that's all about your hormones as well. So really our hormones regulate everything about us and how we feel at any given moment. And we always teach that your health is not about how you feel, it's about how well you function. You can't just base your health on how you feel. But the reality is, because we all know people that feel great, they feel fantastic, and they die of a heart attack. And we know people that have a golf ball sized tumor that they don't feel, they have no awareness it's there. I'll stub my toe and think that the world is coming to an end, but yet there's people with cancer and tumors that don't even feel the problem. So while we can't base our health just on how we feel, we also have to realize that how we feel is pretty darn important. It determines our in reality, I think it's our ceiling. I think how we feel is really the ceiling to how effective or how productive or how happy we can really be. If you feel real great, if you've got great energy and great vitality and you feel fantastic, then you've got the potential to be a great dad, a great spouse, a great employer, a great friend or workout partner. If you feel, not everyone's gonna get there, but that's your ceiling. On the other end of that, if you feel crummy, if you feel really bad, then that's about as good a dad as you can be, a good a spouse or friend or whatever you can be. That's all determined based on how you feel. I think I've got some experience with that firsthand because for almost the last 7 years, my wife has dealt with a debilitating condition that makes her feel horrible almost every single day. It's called POTS. It's postural ortho. It's an acronym that really means sucks, basically. So for 7.5 years, she's really felt terrible. And I really can't imagine feeling bad. On my days that I do feel bad, I'm a bear to be around. I don't really, if you're ever here in the office on those days, just turn around and leave. You could come back another day. But when we feel bad, it affects who we are, how we are with everybody around us. And things are getting better as we apply these maximized living principles. She gets better and better. We're better now than we've been in the last 7 years. So, praise God for that, and it is getting better, and there is hope. But how we feel really dictates almost everything. So your hormones, and we all deal with the symptoms of bad hormonal dysfunction are hot flashes and night sweats, irritability, fatigue, weight gain, almost across the board. Anything you feel bad is related to your hormones. On the other end of that, your vitality, your energy, your stamina is all related to good hormonal function too. The reality is we can change this drastically without drugs, without having to take medications. We can control our hormones, not every time, but a vast majority of the time. As I was doing all the research, you start looking at some of the medical journals and some of the published literature, you start to realize that it all really comes back to those 5 essentials. Everything related to hormones has something to do with one of those 5 categories. There's a lot of research that talks about stress and how that affects our hormones. That falls under maximized mindset. We know the nervous system is the grand conductor that controls all of our hormonal function. We know that your nutrition directly affects your hormones. And obviously we're going to show you how to exercise in as little as 4 minutes a day and 3 days a week. The advanced plan is a little more than that, but that gets you started enough to influence and balance your hormones. And then toxins. Toxins are a biggie these days. We're literally bathing in a toxic soup. About 80,000 chemicals are being used every day in the production of our food and our carpet and our wallpapers. Everything in our body, in our house, our home is bathed in toxins. So we're gonna, this is the hormonal system. I'm gonna leave this up for about 10 seconds and then we're gonna take it down and do a pop quiz on that. So make sure you memorize, no pop quiz, but it's just to illustrate that how complex our hormonal system really is. Your hypothalamus is talking to the pituitary, which talks to the adrenals. So it's essentially like a big symphony or a big orchestra that's really controlled all by your nervous system. So you got to realize your brain is controlling every bit of that hormonal function. Every time that your thymus releases the thyrosin, all those hormonal functions are directly controlled by the brain through the nervous system. The main players in the hormonal game are estrogen, and we don't have to have a real deep knowledge of these, but I think a good overview really helps. So estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. When it comes to estrogen and progesterone, they typically counter one another. So what estrogen does, progesterone does the opposite. So one causes headaches and irritability, the other one reduces headaches and irritability. One causes bone reformation, one doesn't. So they counter each other very effectively. Testosterone, we typically think of that being as more the male hormone for energy and fat loss and muscle building, but it really has as much to do with females as it ever does with men. And most women nowadays are extremely low in their testosterone levels. Cortisol, everyone in this room, this is our enemy. Cortisol is your enemy. If you're an American and you live a typical American lifestyle, then cortisol is at the root of a lot of our issues with hormones, and obviously thyroid. Raise your hand if you know a woman that has thyroid problems. That should be about every one of us. So 80% of women in this country have thyroid dysfunction. That's not 40% or 30%, that's 80%. And I would imagine the other 20% are either underdiagnosed or they're maybe heading in that direction as well. That's epidemic in our culture. The main issue that we deal with when it comes to hormones is estrogen dominance. So when that balance of estrogen and progesterone gets out of balance, we start to see things like irritability and anxiety and hot flashes, insomnia, weight gain, headaches, migraines, and depression. Those are all common symptoms of estrogen and progesterone imbalance. So the typical way we deal with these problems is through what's called hormone replacement therapy. I think we've all heard of this. There's been, the use of it is declining somewhat over the last few years, but it is definitely still around. Dr. Abramson, who is a Harvard medical doctor, he actually showed that it does not only does it not increase the risk, it actually increases the risk of heart disease, strokes, Alzheimer's. Those things actually go up when we use synthetic hormone replacements. So then what do? What's the alternative? And that's what we'll talk about shortly. A woman's risk of breast cancer increases by 8% per year that she's on hormone replacement therapy. Now, we all know women that are on this type of therapy, but yet they don't know this information. There's a landmark study that was the Women's Health Initiative. That was done, it actually was stopped at about 2002. 16,000 women, it was a landmark study, tons of data that they could have compiled, but they had to stop the study early because women were dying of heart attacks. They were having tremendous incidences with strokes and blood clots. By the way, Premarin is the more common used hormone replacement, which stands for pregnant mare's urine. So that's, anybody know that's what Premarin actually really means? I find it hard to believe that that's the only thing we can do to help balance our hormones is to take pregnant horses' urine tablets. It just doesn't make a whole lot of common sense. It makes a lot of money, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. So the three issues, number one is the standard American diet, number one is xenoestrogens, and number one is stress. So those all equally have an impact on our hormonal imbalance. And those are the three things that you really have to look at your life and say, okay, how can I do better in those three areas? Keep in mind with all this, none of this is about doing perfect. Nothing we teach, nothing we ever preach about from here is about doing anything perfect. It's about doing things better. So when you're thinking about a lot of these things we talk about could seem a little overwhelming to implement or get your family to implement, but the key is to do better, not be perfect. So the essential number three, which is our maximized nutrition. We've all heard of the typical traditional food pyramid. Does anybody know what the standard American diet causes too much of? There's one main hormone. Inflammation, yes, but what hormone does it cause the secretion of? Insulin. Insulin is in essence your master hormone. If you want to control your hormones, control insulin. Insulin by proxy controls your estrogen levels and estrogen dominance. It controls your testosterone secretion. It controls your progesterone production. Almost all of your other hormones respond to what your insulin levels are doing. So there's a thing called insulin resistance that we all have a problem with in this culture. That leads directly to these hormonal problems. So too much insulin wreaks havoc hormonal issues. So the real key is just take that food pyramid and flip it upside down. That's really the trick. And it's not completely that way, but that's really more the way we should be moving than the way we are now. The way we're moving as a culture, what we know about nutrition is so far away from the truth. Even the new food plate that they now espouse is still light years away from where we need to be. In fact, the consumption of grains should be at the bottom of the list, because the biggest influence over our insulin levels and therefore our other hormone levels is how our body responds to insulin is based on how many sugars and grains that we consume. So sugars and grains are the name of the game. That's the enemy. For most Americans, they're not eating Skittles or Pop-Tarts. They're eating way too many breads and pastas and cereals and crackers, chips, pretzels, cookies, bagels, muffins, all those things that come in like a box bag or a can. That's the stuff that's driving our hormones crazy. So the key with this is to move away from those, not to be perfect, because you can't live a life with no bread. That's just not very realistic, but be moving away from those in that direction. So the research showed that actually ingesting sugar, and they took a very small amount of sugar and measured it in a very short amount of time, reduced the men's testosterone production by about 25%. So it takes a very small amount of actual sugar to actually drop that almost a quarter. And the thing with these athletes, or we have kids that play soccer or sports, we give them Gatorade when they're on the field competing, which is basically, it's sugar water. So we're not only are we stifling their hormones, but we're also reducing their immune function. We're really wreaking havoc in their bodies. So unless you're running a long distance event where you're doing a half marathon or you really need a lot of sugar and electrolytes, there's really no place for Gatorade or sports drinks or any sugary meals. So the other issue is our fatty acid content. So there's good fats and there's also bad fats. And just for simplicity's sake, the omega-3s are your good fats, the omega-6s are the bad. When that ratio gets out of balance, it creates a thing called inflammation. And everybody's heard about inflammation. Does everybody know what diseases inflammation is linked to? Yeah, all of them. Somebody said all. That's perfect. Almost every disease of modern man is linked completely or in some part to inflammation. Almost all cancers, all heart disease, all type 2 diabetes, all Alzheimer's and dementia, chronic fatigue syndrome and hormone issues, all of those things are linked directly or almost completely or indirectly to inflammation. So when that ratio gets out of balance, most Americans are about 25-1. The ideal ratio should be about 2-1. So 2 of the bad fats, omega-6s, to 1 of the omega-3s. Now, schizophrenics are typically found to be around 50-1. A lot of kids with ADD and ADHD can be around 40-50-1. So the further out of that balance you get, that of that normal ratio, the more it affects your brain function and also drives up inflammation. So our optimal omega, everyone needs to be taking an omega supplement. There's a very easy test to see if you need to be taking an omega-3 supplement. You take 2 fingers, everybody take 2 fingers, you put it right behind your throat, and if you feel a pulse, then you need to be taking omega-3 supplements every single day. There's just, unless you're an Eskimo who lives on a body of water eating oily fish every single day, you have to be taking omega-3 supplements. It's not. It's a separate. It has to be taken separately. It's not found in a multi. They're oil-based, so they can't really be put into a tablet. So the core plan, we teach 2 nutrition plans that are very effective at reducing inflammation, getting rid of the grains and sugars, and balancing hormones. The first one is the core plan. Now this one is a little bit easier. It's a little simpler for families to implement. And it deals with the 3 main macronutrients. You have fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. The key with fats is you want to remove the bad fats and replace them with good or healthy fats. So what are some examples of bad fats? Margarine's a bad one for sure. Canola oil, Crisco. By the way, does anyone know where canola comes from? Because Yep, Canadian oil low acid. It's actually an acronym. We've been taught that canola oil is one of the healthiest things you can do. It's got the American Heart Association seal of approval on it, and it's got that weird plant corn looking thing that looks like a canola plant. No one's ever seen a canola plant because it doesn't exist. It stands for Canadian oil low acid. It's genetically modified rapeseed oil. By the time it reaches the grocery store shelf, it's already rancid. So eliminate that as soon as humanly possible. So that's some of the good fat. We'll cover these in more detail in a minute. Protein, we're moving away from commercially raised to more naturally raised animals. The health of the animal makes all the difference. So when you're looking at a steak or an egg or a chicken or whatever type of animal product you can name, the health of that animal is what makes all of the difference. If that animal was healthy before it made it to your plate, then that's a healthy meal. If that animal was sick and pumped full of hormones and antibiotics and was standing in its own feces all day long, then that's not a healthy steak or chicken or egg, right? So it's all about the health of the animal. The other one is carbohydrates. So we all know this. We need to move away from whole grains, or move away from white simple grains to more whole grains. But there are some issues with grains. Even if they're whole grains, you're still dealing with two main issues, which is glycemic load, because a lot of whole grain carbohydrates are still fairly high glycemic, which means they convert to insulin, or they convert to sugar and raise your insulin levels. And gluten is another issue. Now, about 80% of us are gluten sensitive. Whether we react to it when we immediately eat it or it happens under the surface later, about 80% of us are highly sensitive to gluten. Now, about 1 out of 160 people are what's called celiac, which means when they eat gluten, they get sick almost immediately. It's a visceral reaction almost right off the bat. But about 80% of us are highly sensitive to it. And again, that deals also with inflammation. So the fats, so we're eliminating margarine and your canola oils and how do we turn a good fat into a bad fat? Overheating it. So when you heat olive oil to the point that it smokes, it becomes rancid. So you never want to overheat a good fat because you turned a good one into a bad one. So at cooking temperatures, when you're cooking at a lower temperature, you always want to try to use butter, good old-fashioned organic butter. Can I get an amen for good old-fashioned organic butter? And olive oil. Those are your two low temperature cooking oils. And then at high temperatures, you want to use grapeseed oil. And what's the other one? Coconut oil, right? We all should know those, right? And if you have coconut oil, eat it by the spoon, rub it on your skin, put it in your hair. Go crazy with coconut oil. Just do whatever you can with it. The more we study on coconut oil, the more good things we see about that. Every single day I see almost something new that's positive in the direction of coconut oil. Those cans of full-fat coconut oil, or coconut milk, I go through about 6 of those a week in our house. We literally blaze through those like crazy. But that's not what we've all been taught. We've been taught that if you want to lose weight, you got to reduce the fat. You got to avoid saturated fats. That's almost pure saturated fat. Well, so is mother's breast milk. So are mothers causing atherosclerosis and heart disease to their babies when they're breastfeeding? So it's one of the most perfect substances on planet Earth, and it's loaded with saturated fat. So again, it's all about where it comes from. If it comes from a healthy animal or a plant, it's good for you. If it comes from a sick animal or man-made, it's bad. Commercial meats have been linked to cancer, heart disease. Whenever they do studies that vilify red meat, you'll see where you should only eat red meat once a week, or increasing your red meat consumption causes cancer or heart disease. They never distinguish between commercially raised and naturally raised. They never make the distinction between those two. So when they do the studies, they're looking at the sick, unhealthy animals that are causing those issues. Eat more chicken. More healthier chicken. And then the core plan for carbohydrates, you've got to know a little bit about the glycemic index. So if you guys know about this, it's how quickly your body responds with insulin production. So you want the lower glycemic carbohydrates, those are the better. The higher glycemic you want to stay away from. So your lower glycemic are basically your veggies. Almost any vegetable that you could name fits into that lower glycemic index. Your moderate are the ones you have to keep an eye on. So those are things like corn and sweet potatoes, certain beans, chickpeas. You got to watch those because those can only in moderation, and you want to eat them only after lunch, or reduce them after lunch, only before lunch. High glycemic, those are things like white potatoes and Skittles and Trix cereal and all those other good things that we were raised on. So you want to avoid those as much as possible. And then you want to try to eliminate completely the white bread, white sugar. Avoid anything that's white, essentially.
You were about to say something about lunch.
Lunch, yep. So we tend to eat so many foods after lunch. We eat enough food, or as many calories or glycemic load foods, that we could run the Boston Marathon, but then we go to sleep. So we eat all these carbs and calories at night, and then we go to sleep. So where do we think that stuff is actually going? So yeah, eliminate the white stuff, or you'll end up in a white office with a white man with a white lab coat giving you little white pills. So make sure you stay away from all the white stuff. So carb replacements, if everybody doesn't have this book, I highly recommend you get that book. And I don't like to push a lot of products, but that's one we have to know about nutrition. You literally, that's one we all have got to own. It has desserts. I eat more desserts now than I've probably ever eaten at any point in my life. I eat brownies and almond cookies and apple pie and this chocolate bark thing, which is fantastic. Literally eating stuff that you could never imagine you can eat, but it's all about the ingredients. Instead of using white flour, you're using coconut flour or almond flour. Instead of using sugar, you're using xylitol or stevia. So these lateral shifts are what makes all this stuff work. If I tell you to quit eating donuts and start eating broccoli, that is not a lateral shift. That is a huge vertical leap. But if we tell you to quit using margarine and start using butter, that's an easy lateral shift. We can all do that. Instead of using cow's milk, start using almond milk. I mean, those are easy lateral shifts. That's how you get healthy, is you make a lot of lateral shifts and eat a lot of desserts that are healthy. Our diet plan is based on hormones and desserts. That's the name of the game. So flaxseed bread, cupcakes, flaxseed muffins. I'm not a huge fan of flax as a cooking meal. I much prefer almond or coconut flour. I think those are much better consistency. They tend to hold together, and I think they taste a lot better. But you can make cookies and crackers and breads and all these other things. The key is we have to just take a little bit of time to do this stuff. You know, we can't keep doing it the same way and expect a different result. Xenoestrogens. This is a biggie for men, women, kids, your neighbor. Everybody in this planet is highly susceptible to what are called xenoestrogens. These are man-made chemicals that are made in a lab that mimic and do almost the exact same function as estrogen does. So it binds to the exact same receptor site. It causes the same exact hormonal response as estrogen. Now the key is we got to figure out where these things are actually coming from. Phthalates are a biggie. Those are your plasticizers. Almost anything in that really squishy plastic. So if you have things that are plastic, like the plastic bottles that are really squishy, don't ever heat foods in a plastic container. That's the worst of the worst. If you ever put like a plastic bowl in the microwave and heat that up, you're leaching phthalates into the food at an enormous rate. Anything that has soy in it. Almost all soy products are loaded with estrogen mimicking xenoestrogens. Now the only exception to that would be fermented soy. So tempeh, like miso, natto, the things that you get at the Japanese restaurant, those are an okay alternative, but you want to avoid like your tofu and your soy milk and all these crazy soy cheese replacement. Edamame's okay too, but I would get that organic. And then around the home, anything that contains parabens. So it would serve us all to go home tonight, look at all of our cleaning products and lotions and cosmetics, flip around the back, and if it contains paraben, so ethyl paraben or benzoate paraben, anything that ends in paraben, that is a paraben. So those are all xenoestrogens. You will be surprised how many products you currently use on a regular basis that very likely have those things in it. The average woman puts on 14 products every single day. That's just the average. The average man uses about 8 products every single day. And when you think about it, you have shampoo and conditioner, and you have lotion, and then you have deodorant, and then you have toothpaste, and then you start adding these things up, and soap. It's a tremendous amount of chemicals that we're slathering all over our bodies. The good news is our bodies are pretty amazing at getting rid of these things already. We just have to quit filling up the bucket quicker than our body can get rid of stuff in the bucket. Does that make sense? Yes. Water is a massively good detoxifier. Phthalates, parabens, and then phenoxyethanol for you chemistry buffs. So for the foods you got to watch out for is your non-organic coffee. So when you're doing just regular Folgers or your non-organic coffee, those are the things that are causing or contain a lot of these xenoestrogens. Your canola oil, commercially raised beef and chicken, those are all issues. Anything that's been sprayed with pesticides or herbicides. That's why it's important to move toward organic. That's where you get less of the pesticides and the fungicides, all that sprayed produce. Now if you're making the move to organic, what should you switch first? Meat. Always switch your meats first. Why would we switch meats first before tomatoes and apples?
Toxins not in the fat.
That's right. They live in the fat. So when you consume a toxin, your body stores it in your fat cells. which is why a lot of people have trouble losing fat, because their body is so toxic, their body will not release the fat until you get rid of the toxins. That's where your body stores them. It won't get rid of it till you get rid of the toxins. So when we eat animals, you're eating whatever that animal's eaten for its entire lifespan. So if it's a 5-year-old animal or 3-year-old animal, you're eating 3 years of accumulated pesticide exposure. When you eat a tomato that's not organic, you're eating about a month or 2 of pesticide exposure. So it's all accumulation. So switch your meats first, and then you do your veggies next. The hard part's in the grocery store, because we're there and the apples that are not organic look so big and shiny and they're so crispy, and the ones that are organic look tiny and they're bruised. They look like they've been kicked down the grocery aisle, and they cost like twice as much. So if you spend money on things that make you healthier, is that an investment or an expense?
Investment.
Every time. Every time you spend your money on things that ultimately will make you healthier, that's always an investment. So we have to pull this health thing out of the cable TV category and out of the gas for our car category. It's an investment in our health. You either make more investments now or you'll pay more later. We know that. So maximizing our mindset. The biggest reason our mind is an issue is because that's where all this stress is coming from. And when we're under stress or chronic stress, we release that hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is an amazing benefit. There's really a lot of good from cortisol. If you're going to get up in the morning, you got to have a cortisol surge. If you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, it's a good thing, right? But we're not running from saber-toothed tigers, although our body thinks that we are. Your body can't tell the difference between reality and something that's vividly imagined, or things that you bring upon yourself in reality. So it affects your blood pressure, impaired glucose metabolism, decreases thyroid, and it weakens our immune system. So we want to move as far away from cortisol as we possibly can. This is the stress reduction kit. We can print this off for you. So you put it on a firm surface, and then you follow the directions of the kit, and then you repeat step 2 if necessary. If you're unconscious, then stop the activity. So that's essentially what we're doing. Is anytime I hear stress management, I want to vomit, because you would never manage anything else in your life that way. Like, you would never go to your financial planner and do poverty management. You would just build wealth. So why are we managing stress? Why are we not just building peace? So instead of managing stress, to start increasing things that give you peace and happiness in your life. Holding your grandbabies, walking your dog, eating good foods, watch a movie, laugh, cry. All those things that bring you joy, we need to be increasing. Don't worry about managing stress, just increase peace. It's so much easier and so much more fulfilling. Has anyone ever seen Covey's 4 Quadrants? Stephen Covey wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So where we spend our time determines our stress outcomes. So quadrant 1 is your urgent important. So these are your crisis. These are things that you can't get away from, you've got to do because now the wheels have fallen off. 2 is not urgent but important. That's where you want to spend most of your time. That would be prevention. Those are things that are keeping you from ending up in that urgent, important category. 3 is your not important but urgent. So it's like some phone calls at work. You got to go to work, right? Some of those emails might be classified as urgent and important. And then 4 is just junk, time wasters, junk email, frivolous conversations. The problem is we tend to spend most of our time in 3 and 4, which are causing our stress problems, where if we spent more time in 2, we would not ever get into 1. So an example of that is like date night for your wife. That would be in category 2. Not urgent, but it's very important. If you spend date night with your wife, then you don't sit across from a divorce attorney later down the road, right? So if you make good choices with your health, you don't end up in doctor's offices or have diseases and cancer and spend more money on drugs and surgeries. So it's where we spend our time that is hugely important. We got to talk about exercise. The 4th essential that we cover is maximizing your oxygen and lean muscle mass. Now, what you got to know about exercise, it is only an adaptive stimulus. The only thing that exercise is an adaptive stimulus. It's stimulating your body to adapt to whatever you just did. And that's how we have to start thinking of exercise. Now, some people do it for fun or enjoyment, or I don't really do much of it for a whole lot of, I do some for fun and enjoyment because I know I feel crazy when I don't do it, but during, it's not always all that fun. But we show you how to do what's called surge training, which is where all the science is moving toward, and you can do it as little as 4 minutes a day. My workout for the last 3 months is 4 minutes a day, 6 days a week. That's all I do. 4 minutes a day, 6 days a week. Does that sound too good to be true for anybody in the room? Hopefully, try, if you raise your hand, you got to come up here and do it with me. So the key is all about hormones. So what we pick a couple of movements, and you can go as simple as doing like calisthenic movements or jumping jacks, or if you can't do a jumping jack, you can do like a squatting motion or punching in the air. If you can't punch in the air, then I guess you can wiggle your fingers as fast as you can. But the key is you got to go as fast as you can go, as hard as you can go for 20 seconds. So during that 20 seconds, it's all out intensity. The way you know you're doing it right is when you get to about 18 seconds, you're going, oh my God, and then 20, you're done. And at that point, you're out of breath. The trick to it is, that's the point you've got to get to, because that's what creates the adaptive stimulus. Because when you reach that point in exertion, you tell your body it has to get ready for the next time that you do that. So it's going to increase your muscle mass to give you more muscle to be ready. It's also going to start burning fat for fuel because of the high rate of activity that you're using. So when you're doing that so hard and fast, you're actually increasing your testosterone and growth hormone production, and you're suppressing the hormone called cortisol. So you're burning fat, you're building muscle, you're doing that for the next 36 hours. So it's 20 seconds on, 20 seconds off, 20 on, 20 off. After 4 minutes, you're done. So the way it looks like in like what I did today is I set my timer, and I always start it and I let the first 20 seconds kind of roll by as I kind of get ready for what I'm doing. Today I did a squatting motion, which is basically just up and down as fast as you can go. And then after that 20 seconds I rest. The next 20 is just a punching motion. And I just alternate those back and forth for 4 minutes. So you're basically doing 3 sets of each movement. You're only really doing like 6 sets of 20 seconds of work.
You're only doing 2 minutes of actual...
Yeah, it's really only about 2 minutes of actual exercise. That is it. The problem is we've all been so pre-programmed that you've got to do 45 minutes on the treadmill. You get your heart rate into that fat burning zone, which is ridiculous because no heart rate actually makes you burn fat. It's what you do to your muscles. That's just flawed science. That research comes from the 1960s, really more like the 50s, 60s, and somewhat in the 1970s. Old research, and the problem is when you do a sustained activity for more than about 30 minutes, so you jog on the treadmill for 30 minutes, you take a spin class for 30 minutes or a Zumba class for 30 minutes, anything over 30 minutes makes you release cortisol because you're stressing your body out. Your body thinks it's now under stress, so it releases cortisol. So not only are you not producing testosterone and growth hormone, you're also now releasing cortisol. That's why you see the Nashville Marathon, about 70% of those people are overweight. Have you ever seen an overweight sprinter? Has that ever even existed in history? No. About 70% of marathon runners are overweight, but 0% of sprinters, because they use their body with a very effective adaptive stimulus. And sprinters, by the way, are not lifting a bunch of heavy weights. They're just running with their legs, but they do it at such a high level, the hormones have to respond to that over time. The trick with this, the way that you make this work, for 2 hours after your exercise, you cannot eat any grains and no sugars. That's the key. So for 2 hours, this makes 80% of the difference. For 2 hours after your workout, no grains and no sugars. The minute you eat sugar, you sip on the Gatorade after you did your workout, you're going to spike your insulin levels. The minute insulin starts to climb, testosterone and growth hormones start to deplete. So you're inversely affecting the hormones. Afterwards, I'll do a shake. So I do one of our shakes, the vanilla protein with a half a can of coconut milk, a handful of berries, a bunch of spinach, flax seeds, cinnamon, a little bit of the liquid stevia to make it taste sweeter, and then I blend it up and it tastes like ice cream. So I do my little 4-minute workout and then I go eat ice cream. How about that? So I would just concentrate on chasing good fat, good protein. Your good fat sources are pretty varied. You can do almost any raw nuts and seeds. So even if you're at the gas station, you can still get those pumpkin seeds, those white pumpkin seeds in a bottled water. So you can still eat healthy even in the gas station nowadays. And then nuts, seeds, berries, beans, all those things are not beans, but berries. Those are all decent sources of good protein and good fat, not so much the berries. Avocados, any kind of lean protein, lean meat, but I just do it for simplicity's sake. I'll just always do the shake afterwards. It's that simple. Max Fit, the more I take this product, the more I'm amazed by it. It contains 2 products that are very effective. Number one is green coffee bean extract. I think some of you probably heard that if you watched Dr. Oz, he has a little special on that. But it actually helps to reduce your insulin sensitivity. So it helps to keep your cortisol levels low by reducing your insulin metabolism. So it's buffering that insulin spike that we all get. And then the other one is what's called ashwagandha. Everybody say ashwagandha. That's fun. So it reduces cortisol levels by about 25%. So it's a very potent mix of those 2 things. So I take that about twice a day, once in the morning, once at night on an empty stomach, and literally it's made a tremendous amount of difference. I need a little bit of cortisol. You guys cause me enough stress, so I want as low cortisol levels as humanly possible. The key is it's reducing those cortisol levels. That's the name of the game long term. If we're going to live long and happy and live on our terms, we got to reduce our cortisol levels and optimize growth hormone and testosterone. That's the way we've got to start moving. Otherwise, we're breaking down at 60 and 70 with all these tumors and arthritis and everything else. Our bodies are designed to live about 120 years of good health. The University of Texas found in 2004, they did a very comprehensive study, we should live about 120 years of no disease, no arthritis, no illness, no cancers, no tumors, no dementia. We should all be about 120 years of good health. But how many Americans make it to age 60 in good health and on no medications? Take a guess. How many Americans out of 1,000 make it to age 60 in good health and on no medications? No arthritis, no disease, no illnesses. 60 good health, no meds. How many? 5, so what? Yeah, it's 1.8. Almost 2 people out of 1,000 in this country makes it to age 60 in good health. That's terrifying. That's not the way God designed our bodies. We're just not living remotely congruent to the way that we're designed. And the key is we don't have to be perfect. Your bodies are so amazing. If we just move in the right direction, your body heals. It's your body's design. You got the best doctor in the planet already living inside of you. Now, this is how the nervous system is tied into this, because if you're going to control your hormones, you got to make sure your nervous system has the ability to control your hormones the way you're designed. It's the first system to develop. So when you're in the embryo, when 2 eggs come together and make 4, or 2 sperm and egg, they make 2 cells, those make 4 and 8 and whatever. The first organ to develop is actually your brain. Your nervous system forms first, because then you can develop the heart and the lungs and the stomach, everything. It's like a tree trunk with the branches and then the fruit grow. So it regulates all the systems through life, and it truly is our mind, body, spirit. So when you endure stress, when we wonder how stress affects the nervous system, that's the system that's actually dealing with stress. So the problem is we always break down at our weakest link. Where do people typically hold their stress?
The neck.
Yeah, neck or shoulders or their back. Does anyone ever say, I hold all my stress in my thumb? Or all my stress is in my knee, right? Nobody ever holds their stress anywhere except their neck, their back, or somewhere along their spinal column, because that's where your central nervous system resides. So wherever your weakest link is where you're going to hold your stress. Does that make sense? Now, you can't get rid of stress completely until you're dead. The key is minimizing stress or increasing peace, and then keeping our weak links less weak. So a normal cervical curve, the reason that curve is important, so we take an x-ray of the neck, we want to see that you've got that nice arc of life is what we call that. Because when we have that curve in our neck, our spinal cord is like the mushy part of your hand. Everybody hold your hand like the letter C? That mushy part is your spinal cord. So it's really loose and relaxed when you have the proper curve the way God designed us. When we lose our curves from a condition called subluxation, and you guys could have gotten this from a fall or an injury or a car wreck, at some point in your life, very likely, your spine was pretty darn close to perfect. When you come out of the womb, if nobody yanks on your neck or pulls you out through forceps or no aggressive OB gets a hold of you, then more than likely when you learn to do tummy time and you push your head up off the floor, you're going to develop most of these normal curves. We all pretty well look like that at some point unless we had birth trauma. But over time, when we have a car wreck or a fall, or we carry a book bag to school every day, and then we sit in a desk and stare at a teacher, and then we stare at our phone and stare at a computer all day long, that causes our spine to misalign. Over time, that will change the configuration of our spine. So instead of having those nice curves, a lot of people have what's called a reversed curve in the neck. You see on this MRI how the spinal cord, that's the brain stem there, that's the spinal cord coming down. See how it looks like an hourglass right through there? So when the spinal cord is stretched that way because the curve's going the other way, it's basically choking the spinal cord. But the problem is if you took that x-ray to your medical doctor, what do you think most of them would say? You're fine. No arthritis, no degeneration, there's nothing breaking down, you're okay. You lost a little bit of the curve in your neck, but so what? They don't realize that that's actually choking the brain's ability to get messages to and from the body. I don't get senior citizens with negative curves in their neck. I've actually almost never had one because of what it does to the spinal cord. But the key is that's reversible. If we get the right care, we can actually reverse and get the spine back into its more proper position if we do the right therapies and then we apply the x-rays at the end to compare and make sure we get the right progress. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The top of the neck, serotonin, is one of those hormones that balances your cortisol. So just like progesterone and estrogen kind of counter one another, so does serotonin and cortisol. As serotonin goes up, cortisol goes down and vice versa. So one thing you can do to go against all this cortisol issue is to increase your serotonin receptors. The largest receptors for serotonin are in the top part of your neck, and they're also in your gut. Those are the two largest concentrations of serotonin receptors. Does anyone know what serotonin does in your body? It's the 6 F's. It's fight, flight, feel good, food, feeling, and sex. Nobody got that. So the serotonin receptors are at the top of the neck. When children are born and pulled through the birth canal, the top part of the neck about 80% of the time is misaligned. We know when that happens, it directly compresses the brainstem, and then your serotonin levels will directly drop in response to that. So that's the first place we check. Anytime we see someone and we check their x-rays, we always check the neck first. Why would we check that first? It's the closest to the brain. Is there any way that stuff gets to the body without going through the head and neck first? So every time your heart beats, your brain has to send a signal to the heart telling it exactly how to beat. Every time you wiggle your toes, your brain has to send a message to your toes. Every time your immune system works or you digest food, that system has to be intact to tell your body how to function. So what we're focusing on is where there's an interference to that body's or brain's ability to communicate with the body. Now, a lot of times that'll show up as back pain or neck pain or headaches or digestive issues, but we're not really treating the symptoms. We're clearing the nervous system so that your body can heal itself. We've all got the power to be healthy. That's it. It's in the package. When you cut your hand, you don't have to think about healing it. You cut yourself shaving, you don't have to put Neosporin or a Band-Aid on the cut. Your body heals itself. Your body regulates your hormones and runs the pituitary. You don't think about those things consciously. Your body does that on its own. But it's based on how well your brain can communicate with the rest of your body. It's such a simplistic concept, but nobody gets that thing checked in our current healthcare system. Because when you go to your doctor, where do they normally check? They check all these, and thank God they do. And if your heart goes bad, there's a great drug we can give you to manage that. If your liver's having trouble, there's good drug. If your pancreas, we give you insulin. If your stomach hurts, we give you Nexium. So there's great drugs to manage those symptoms when the organs start to fail, but no one's checking to see how the brain is controlling those organs. And that's really the thing that doesn't sit well with us is people are sick, suffering, and dying just because they don't know. And that's not the only essential. That's why we have 5 essentials. And it's not the 3 essentials and the 2 good ideas. They're all 5 essentials. So we all just have to kind of look at our lives and say, okay, where can I do a little better in each of those 5 categories? It's not perfect. It's how can I just do a little better? And that's for all of it. And we will walk you through that. If you live in a different area, if you have family that lives in a different town, help us get them to a different area or to a doctor that does the same kind of work. Go to maximizedliving.com. You can put in their zip code and we'll tie them in with an office that does exactly what we do. So some of the warning signs that you're subluxated or you're breaking down is headaches. The nerves in the neck go to the head and control your head and headaches. Depression, again, that relates to the serotonin receptors at the top of the neck. Acid reflux, the nerves at the top of the middle part of the back are controlling the stomach. And hypertension, I can't even count the number of cases of people who've ditched their blood pressure medicines. They're in that jug up there because we cleared the nerves that are controlling their heart. How many of their cardiologists are checking the nerves that are controlling their heart? It's just not how the system is set up. Vertigo, neck and back pain. And again, we don't treat those symptoms. We're just allowing the body to heal and function the way it's designed. It's really very, very simple. So the way you know how important something is to your body is how long you can go without it. So the things we can go the most without, like food. You can go a month without eating. We've all seen Survivor, right? You can go a long time, not have to eat. Well, you can only go a few days without drinking water. So water is more important than food to your body. You can only go a few minutes without air, so that'd make air more important than water, which is more important than food. But you can't even go one split second without nerve supply. So the minute I cut through your spinal cord, guess what happens? You die. You're done. 100% of the time or zero. It's 100% of the time, 10 out of 10. It always happens. So that's what we have to keep functioning if we're going to keep your hormones level, if we're going to keep you from having cancer and heart disease and diabetes. We got to address all these 5 essentials, but make sure your nervous system's running your body the way that you're designed. Thank you guys, and God bless.